guys, welcome back to the channel. This is Greg. Today we are going to be replacing the bushings for the steering rack, and there's a whole list of all the episodes for this steering and suspension project down in the summary, so check that out. So let's go ahead and get these bushings replaced. All right, before we get started, some things you may want to have on hand. I have a breaker bar, not 100% necessary, but definitely a 1/2 inch ratchet, a couple of 3/8 ratchets. I've got a 18mm and 15mm deep well, 6-sided. That's for the steering rack. And then a 5/8 and 11/16. That's for the steering shaft, where we disconnect it up close to the firewall. Some extensions, again for the steering rack, or for the steering shaft. It's easier to come up from the bottom and turn the nut on the bottom of the bolt to disconnect that than it is to turn from the top, just for access reasons. So some extensions that come in handy. A hammer, a couple of different pairs of pliers, which is really all you need. So should be a quick job. See, I've gone with the offset Prothane bushings. These do come with a little small tube of silicone grease. This, of course, came from Altered Fox. Altered Fox carries a whole line of Prothane parts and energy suspension. It's always also a good idea to have some silicone grease on hand, just in case you don't have this, or you're putting in a used part. Always keep a little tub of this. So just use out. Right, so the first thing you want to do is the top of the steering shaft here. There's a bolt up here at the top of the shaft. So you just want to make a mark right here, just to make sure you get it aligned back the same way when you put it back in. And then the bolt here, it's a 5/8 head on top, and then the 11/16 nut on the bottom. So you'll need to hold that to get this bolt out to allow the shaft to come out of the sleeve here. All right, here's the nut and the bolt. And probably be easiest if you have a way to secure the bolt up top, or have somebody hold it and then turn it from underneath with an extension. You'll get a lot better turn on there, and it'll come off a lot quicker. Be sure and use some thread locker when you put this back together. Alright, so here's my steering rack bushings, the steering rack bolts rather. You got one here, and then one down at the other end right here. So I've already taken out the inner and outer tie rods because I'm replacing them, but you don't have to remove those at all. You can just unbolt the steering rack as it is. But you will need to disconnect the tie rod ends from the spindles at minimum. So yeah, let's get to it. I'm going to use my 18mm socket with a breaker bar. So these can be pretty tough to break loose. And then I've got a 15mm socket. This bolt goes all the way through to the cross member, all the way through to the cross member to the back side of it. And then I've got a socket on back here. So this bolt is this entire length. You might be able to see it up in there. That's it, where it goes through. Alright, so we just had the washer and nut on this end, and then now this bolt is free and I'm able to push it through, and we'll pull it out of the back side of the K-member. And there you go. Now we'll just rinse and repeat, do the same thing on the other side. And actually, that doesn't look as bad as I thought it was going to look. Doesn't appear to be dry rotted. It's possible these were replaced at some point. Outside bushing with the pliers to get it out of the way. Again, not bad. Surprised, these had to have been replaced at some point. I mean, this looks like brand new in here, inside and out. Alright, so I've got the outer bushing off here and the one off over here. So this thing should slide forward now. Yeah, this side comes right off. This side with the steering shaft removed should come out enough. There we go. So just keep working that forward. That bushing is already sliding out there, so we'll get that off. Alright, let me set this camera down. Actually, it looks like the rag joint is kind of catching up here, so we just have to kind of do the best I can with this. Make sure I can get this all the way off. In the meantime, let's get this other bushing out of here. Inside bushing looks okay. It actually doesn't look as good as the outside bushing. This might actually be older, although it's still in good shape. So, just work on this other side over here. Alright, so since this side is completely clear, all I have to do is kind of pivot this around, and I should be able to slide this all over here and then spin this whole thing around. Now I can get right in here to where this bushing is, put this out of the way, so without having to disconnect the rag joint. Again, this looks okay. So since the car is lowered, it means our tie rod end is angled up. So the reason for the offset bushings is to basically to move the steering rack up, just so the tie rod is not at such an angle. So it'll still have some angle to it, but it'll just decreases that by, say, 1/4 inch or so. So you want to have these turned when we put them on, so that the hole is at the bottom. So we'll put one on there, put the steering rack on it, then we'll put the other one in there, and then we'll put the bolt through. And that way the steering rack sits higher than normal compared to where the bolt goes through the cross member. So that's it. We're gonna put some silicone grease on here and put these bad boys on. We'll put it on the inside and the outside. And I probably won't get that on video because I don't want to handle my camera after I get silicone all over my hands. So I'm going to set the camera up under the car, and I'll be under there a minute with a couple of these all lubed up. Alright, so I want to go ahead and clean this off just a little bit. Make sure any old grease, old lubricant is off of here. Alright, so I've got silicone all over the bushing, but I'm also going to put it here on the shaft here just to help slide this on. Remember, we want the hole at the bottom. Alright, and then just put the bushing on the driver's side, just like this one. Alright, we're now ready to slide this on. Just before I get to that point, I need to make sure the steering shaft is going where it's supposed to be going. Alright, the steering rack is good. There's some wiring under here. You want to make sure you're not getting that pinched. So remember, the steering rack's going to be sitting up a little bit higher, so it's going to be a little bit closer to the oil pan. So just watch out for your wiring running through there. Okay, time for the rubber mallet. All right, both sides are started. Okay, so I knocked the camera over trying to get this thing in. So what I finally figured out I needed to do was just hammer the steering rack further onto this bushing. That way my sleeve will be a little bit closer to the outside, and I was able to get the bushing started on it, and then I could hammer the bushing right on in, all of course using the rubber mallet. So now my bolt will come through enough where I can get my nut on there now and start it, and then that'll tighten this all the way down to where it needs to be. So, but before I do that, I'm going to do the other side. Okay, so we'll just hammer this on a little bit more. Now that should be coming through enough to where I can get the bushing started on there before I start trying to hammer it into the housing here. There we go. Right, I got this bushing on and the bolt through, so now we're ready to put the washers and nuts back on here. And before you tighten this down, make sure your steering shaft is in place up top. Now, one thing I didn't mention at the beginning is to put a thread locker on both of these nuts, and I believe I did mention to put it on the bolt for the steering shaft. So that's it. We are done. The steering rack is officially raised. Hopefully that'll help a little bit with some bump steer, get the tie rod straightened out just a little bit, and we'll see what kind of springs I end up with and what the height of the car is. Maybe I'll end up doing something more or different, but for now this is it for the steering. I believe next I'm going to be removing the lower control arms and getting ready to replace those. So if you haven't subscribed, subscribe now, and we'll see you next time. See you.